Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to a special 2014 World Series edition of Robert Sports Show. I'm your host, Robert. 2014 World Series gets underway on Tuesday night in Kansas City. It puts the San Francisco Giants versus the Kansas City Royals. The first time that these two clubs have met in the World Series. Both teams have miraculously came from the wild card playing game to make the World Series. It's only the second time that's ever happened. A wild card team has made the World Series together. 2000, I want to say 2006 if I remember correctly. I could be wrong with that. Both teams have came over the years have came from two different ends of the spectrum to get where they are today. In Major League Baseball, before the spring training begins in February, some of the great elite announcers and analysts, do picks and see who's going to make the World Series, playoffs. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. There was only seven people that picked both the Kansas City Royals and the San Francisco Giants to make the playoffs. There's only one man who picked the Kansas City Royals, to be in the World Series. That was Steve Wolf of ESPN, the magazine. He actually picked Kansas City to win the pennant. Kudos to you, man. Kudos to you. Being a 30-year fan of the Kansas City Royals, every year I want to see them there. I know all you fans out there, whatever your favorite team is, every year you want to see your team in the World Series. It's been a long drought, 29 years for the Kansas City Royals fans. Finally, here we are in the World Series. There were seven of these famed analysts that picked both the San Francisco Giants and the Royals to be in the playoffs. Pedro Gomez, Jim Bowden, Jerry Kranzik, Tristan Cockcroft, and Jerry Stark, all of ESPN. Ken Lindbergh and Johanna Carey, both of the Grant Bud, never heard of that, all picked both these teams to be in the playoffs. This is the 110th World Series in Major League Baseball history. There's only been 2 years where there wasn't a World Series played. 1904 because of World War I and 1994 because of the baseball strike. During the 109 years of the World Series, the American League has won 63 games while the National League has won 46. There's been 19 times where the World Series was won by a sweep. And I mention that because of, so far, Kansas City hasn't lost a playoff game this year. They swept the Wild Card Series. They swept the ALCS. Can they sweep the World Series? I don't know. I know during the regular season this year, they played the Giants 3 times and they won all 3 games. All time, the Royals and the Giants have played a total of 12 games. Kansas City is 9-3. They're 7-2 at home and 2-1 on the road. So obviously, with those kind of stats, if they win majority, even if they lose the first 2 games, there's a shot they can bring it back to Kansas City for Game 6. 2-1 on the road, so if they go 2-1 in San Francisco, that would bring it back home. So there's always a chance it could be a sweep. There's always a chance it could go 7 games. 11 out of the last 13 World Series Game 1 winners have went on to win the World Series. So obviously Game 1's Tuesday night. Hopefully the Royals can win that. These two franchises have gone in completely different directions in their, the Giants are full of rich history. They're one of the oldest teams in Major League Baseball. The Giants, currently known as the San Francisco Giants, was founded in 1883. They were known as the New York Gothams from 1883 to 1885. The New York Giants was renamed in 1886 to 1957. In 1958, the San Francisco Giants were born with the westward expansion for Major League Baseball. In the summer of 1957, in 1957, the Giants and the Dodgers both agreed to leave New York and take their rivalry to Southern California. Kind of an interesting story I read about that. The Giants were actually was the first team to look at moving, and the Dodgers were talking about moving to Minnesota, where the Farm Club was at the time. But Major League Baseball wouldn't let the Giants move to San Francisco unless another team decided to move to California. So the Giants and the Dodgers, rivals for years, Brooklyn Dodgers, New York Giants, and then moving to Southern California and being rivals, agreed together, both of them, to move to California in order for it to go through. The Giants have played in 7 different stadiums. You know, the most famous, obviously, was the Polo Grounds in New York, and then in San Francisco, the Candlestick Park, and currently they're playing in AT&T Stadium. The Giants fans have heard this famous words 23 times in their career. Obviously, that famous call you heard was in 1951 Bobby Thompson home run to beat the New York or Brooklyn Dodgers at the time, excuse me, to beat the Brooklyn Dodgers to win the pennant. Obviously, winning 23 pennants in their career, winning 7 World Series. The San Francisco Giants are a historic team. Obviously, the Bobby Thompson moment, you know, when the Giants won the pennant this year, they did it in a walk-off home run. That's the first walk-off home run to win the pennant for the Giants since the famous Bobby Thompson home run. 7 times they've won the World Series. 1905, 1921, 1922, 1933, 1954, 2010, 2012. There was a 56-year gap between the 54 and the 2010 World Series. Obviously, in the 3 times in the last 5 years, the Giants have made the World Series. Like I said, I mean, just a historic team the Giants are. They've had 54 different Hall of Famers play for them. 25 different Hall of Famers in Cooperstown with the San Francisco and or New York hat on. You know, greats like Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, Mel Ott, John McGraw. They have 12 different numbers that are retired. They are the winningest franchise in Major League Baseball history with a total of 10,780 wins. They've lost 9,362 games for a winning percentage of .538, which is spectacular for being that old of a franchise. In the history of the San Francisco / New York Giants, they've only lost 100 games one time, in 1985. They've never lost more than 100. They lost 100 that year. They've won 100 games 7 times. 04, 05, this is 1904, 1905, 1912, 1913, 1962, 1993, and 2003. With that many Hall of Famers and that many pennants, they're only second to the New York Yankees, who had 40 World Series appearances. Not bad for 110 years in World Series history for 2 teams to have almost half of the World Series appearances. Now to the Kansas City Royals. Obviously not a rich history like the Giants have, but they have their own little history, here in Missouri and the Midwest. The Royals were founded in 1969 by then owner Ewing Kauffman, businessman in Kansas City. They've had 2 different stadiums in their career. Kansas City had a stadium already when they had the Kansas City A's. Yes, I said the Kansas City A's. The Oakland A's, currently known as Oakland A's, moved from Philadelphia to Kansas City on westward to Oakland. Obviously, the history of baseball in Kansas City can date back to the early 1900s with the Kansas City Monarchs, a Negro League baseball team. Obviously, back in the day, before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, the Negro League had their own league, own players, Satchel Paige, Jackie Robinson, and some of the greats have ever played baseball. Unfortunately, because they didn't play in the major leagues, they weren't recognized as such great pioneers of the sport. So Kansas City's had such a rich history of baseball, dating back to the 1900s and the Kansas City Monarchs. Now here we are with Kansas City Royals, founded in 1969. They played, like I said, they played in two different stadiums. They've won three American League pennants. As a boy growing up in the 80s and hearing Denny Matthews on the radio, his call, I've heard it twice now, it still touches me. Yes, Kansas City, for the third time, you have a World Series. Obviously, the Kansas City Royals only have one Hall of Famer, George Brett, number 5. 3,000 hit club, one of the best baseball players of his era. They have four numbers that are retired. Their all-time record is 3,528 wins, 3,785 losses for a winning percentage of 482. Not great, not horrible. Postseason, they are 22-25 versus their opponent, the San Francisco Giants, are 92-84 in the postseason. Obviously, in this day and age of baseball, salary cap is always. Let me rephrase that. Salary in general, not salary cap. Excuse me. Salaries are a big part of the game. Obviously, a lot of teams like the Anaheim Angels and the New York Yankees are able to go out and spend oodles and oodles of money on players to try to buy a World Series. You know, the Florida Marlins did that a few years back. I believe it was '02, if I remember correctly. They signed all these free agents, won the World Series, and had a fire sale. The San Francisco Giants are currently 7th in payroll with a $154 million payroll. The Royals are 19th with a $92 million payroll, which for a small market team like the Royals, that is very high payroll. Obviously, these teams are pretty evenly matched. You know, each of them have their Hall of Famers. Yeah, each of them do have Hall of Famers from past. Obviously, the Giants have a lot more than the Kansas City Royals. Currently, the Giants have a lot of young players. They have very young nucleus. They got Madison Bumgarner, a star. They got Buster Posey. They got Brandon Belt. They got, I think some of the other players they have there. But, Pablo Sandoval. They got a lot of guys that have been there, done that. Again, they've been in 3 out of the last 5 World Series. Buster Posey is one of the best catchers in baseball. If you look at the Kansas City Royals, they have Salvador Perez, again, one of the best catchers in baseball. They have that lights-out bullpen. They have just the speed and defense of the outfield. They have Gold Glove in left field. They got Gold Glove at first base, Gold Glove at catcher. They got above-average players in other positions. The Royals are a team that's built on speed, defense, small ball as they call it, or a lot of people call it in the Midwest, Whitey ball. Whitey Herzog, former manager of the Kansas City Royals, also manager of the St. Louis Cardinals, created what they call small ball. It's Whitey ball. You steal a base, you bump runners along, you just do the small fundamentals. Unlike the Giants, who for the most part they wait for that 3-run home run like a lot of teams have done throughout the steroid era. My pick, obviously, if you've seen my other video, my pick to win the World Series, obviously, is the Kansas City Royals. I know a lot of Cardinal fans have finally jumped on the bandwagon of the Royals since the Cardinals were defeated by the Giants. The last time the Royals won the World Series, there was a little play at first base by Don Dinginger where George Orta was out at first base, but the umpire called him safe. They didn't have replay at the time, so the play stood. That play cost the Cardinals the World Series, according to Cardinal fans. But if you look at the history of the play, George Orta getting on base, he was actually thrown out at third base. So he did not score the one-run run at Game 6 of the '85 World Series. He was thrown out, but I know, just the momentum the Cardinals had, and Kansas City went on to win Game 7, 11-0. behind a marvelous, marvelous outing by Brett Sibragan. You know, the Giants, a great team. Kansas City, a great team. The World Series will be a fantastic World Series. Obviously, the ratings for true baseball fans may be down because it is the Royals. It is a small market. It isn't the cute Anaheim Angels with all the money they spend, or the New York Yankees with all the money they spend, or it's not the Chicago White Sox or the Boston Red Sox. It's not all this other storylines involved. It's not Oakland in there, or Oakland, San Francisco, the Bay Bridge World Series. It's not Anaheim and Los Angeles, the Freeway World Series or the Subway World Series in New York, or Boston, St. Louis had more history than these two. It's just a rich history franchise in the Giants versus a haven't been there in a while, mid-market team, Kansas City Royals. So my pick is for Kansas City Royals to win this. I'm gonna say it's a sweep. I hate to. 4 straight. The Royals going to win 12 straight playoff games and win the World Series. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully it's a good World Series. I hope, like I said, hopefully the Royals win. Stay tuned to Robert Sports Show for a baseball video. A lot of stats and stuff, all-time stuff that I think is going to change. There is a stat that Derek Jeter has that will never, ever happen in Major League Baseball again, in my opinion. Stay tuned for that video. Enjoy the World Series. Thanks for watching.